our meeting started so Sandy can get to work up here and show you her wonderful pictures from her wonderful new book. This is a new year. It is also the 25th anniversary of the museum. So as the year goes on, we will have events celebrating that. And it's hard to believe it's been 25 years, but it has. The newsletter is on its way, we hope. We have gone with a new company, and I had technical difficulties with all the computers, printers, everything at my end. And so it is as much my fault as it is the guy that's getting it out, but it will get to you, and we do have a nice crowd. So I appreciate all of you coming without a reminder. We were a little panicked because it didn't get out. But next month, we will have Marion Carpenter, the former principal of Port Salona Elementary here. And the newsletter will be out to tell you when it is. It is actually the second Tuesday of every month at 7 o'clock. It's been a rough month for the membership. In December and January, we've lost many of our valued members. Last month, we lost Bob Green, who was really, really a big at the museum years ago. Of course, he hasn't been available for several years. And we've had Boots Tucker Snipes, who's been to every meeting that I can remember. A lot of valuable people that we missed, but Saturday night we lost Jimmy Crawford, and his wife Nancy is one of our wonderful volunteers, and it was very unexpected and quite a blow. It hasn't been in the paper yet, but all of you stay well, please, and just make it a good year for us. Let's bring Nancy. Sandy, my brain is kind of a little fuzzy today. Sandy,
whatever your name is.
Yeah, Sandy Nancy Thurlow. And she's going to do a wonderful program for us, and we have her book for sale. We have some more tonight. I'll be back out at the table, and we have a lot more at the museum. If you haven't been to the museum lately, please come in. We're having coffee in the morning and donuts. If Bob Walker doesn't get there and eat them all before the rest of them. Anyway, we will turn it over to Sandy and let her tell you about her wonderful new book.
This is my, yeah, it is working, isn't it? I was at the side, so I couldn't tell. The newsletter is not coming out. I do want us to say thank you to Lyda Hardwick, who did newsletters for years and years through 2 pregnancies. She's a young mother with 2 little kids, and it just got to be too much for her. But we were so lucky to have those newsletters all those years. It really helped us build up these audiences, and so it was Lyda, really one of our youngest people that was involved in the book of the museum as a volunteer. So she should be thanked. I have been so interested in the House of Refuge ever since I appointed myself a history lady. At that time, there was like only one history lady. It was me, and I felt, and now we have 2 at least. And then we also have a history man in Rick Ferrari. So it's just wonderful to have others that have delved deeply, deeply, like I feel like I have for the last 25, almost 30 years. So it was always a subject dear to my heart because our House of Refuge is the last one standing. I'm sure you know that. If you don't know it, you better just put it in your head and keep it forever, because that's a very special thing that we have in our county. We have Josh Luther, a Martin County High School graduate, on the front row, but he is in charge. Well, he doesn't like to say in charge. He's in charge of archives. He has. What is your title?
I'm the historian and collections manager for the Historical Society and Museum at the Lighthouse.
And he has a lighthouse. I am so jealous of that lighthouse. But we do have the House of Refuge. Okay, so people, I realize I've written a scholarly article for the Historical Quarterly. It took me a whole year, as much as a book. And I just give it to Dog and Tony shows. This is what I call these. all up and down the coast. But I just felt like if I could do an Arcadia book, I would reach a lot more people than I've ever reached. So when Alice and I were considering to do local history books through Arcadia Publishing Company, I thought, this is my chance, and made a proposal to treat all of the houses of refuge up and down. There were 10. Tell you about them. My daughter-in-law, Deanna Thurlow, and I did this book just on Gilbert's Bar House of Refuge. She designed it, and I collected and put in the information. Tom, my husband, paid for it, and we gave it to the Historical Society of Martin County. All of it. It's theirs to sell, not mine. And the picture on the front was taken by my son, Todd Thurlow. And so it was really a family affair, a gift to Martin County. But it was just on our Gilbert's Bar House of Refuge, the last one standing. So Deanna, my daughter-in-law again, did a map for this Arcadia book. And it gets a little convoluted because we included other life-saving stations, one in South Carolina, and the one other life-saving station besides the Jupiter life-saving station that was in Florida. And I'll explain why we did that later, more about the map later. Okay, Arcadia. So I say, I make this proposal, and I want it to be about Florida's houses of refuge. The first thing they told me, you cannot name it Florida's houses of refuge. That'll be confusing. You know, houses of refuge, people might think, you know, it's a homeless shelter or something. And they said, no, you know, and they are professionals in doing books and distributing and knowing their public, their reading public, the public that likes picture books. And that includes us all, doesn't it? I must have 30 Arcadia books on my shelf. So we called it instead the U.S. Life-Saving Service, Florida's East Coast. And then we had so much trouble getting a picture that passed the grade for the front, and it has to be, grab your eye, it has to tell a story, it has to be clear. And so we have life-saving service, and on the boat, can anybody read what's on the boat?
U.S. Coast Guard.
U.S. Coast Guard. So figure that out. I'll explain it. More about that later, too. So Dr. Gannon is my idol. He is probably very frail now, but he is the premier historian of Florida history. He has done numerous books, and his last one was like all of Florida history in 40 minutes, 45 minutes, and it had a CD in it. I mean, he reaches everybody, and he is the voice of the history at the University of Florida. He is their premier historian. He's retired now. He started out a Catholic priest, a very interesting man, very scholarly. But he came and spoke at the Blake Library, and he gave a list of things for historians and researchers. And one of them was make friends with your archivist, and another one was stay alert to serendipity. I won't go through all of them, but to me, staying alert to serendipity is a way of life. And you just never know what is going to happen in our lives and the curious coincidences that take place. So a few of them are involved in me getting to do this book. Okay, one of the serendipitous things is Janie Gould, and Janie Gould's father actually went to Stuart High School. When she started doing interviews with local history interviews, it was really Leona Lockhart was one of the earliest ones, Alice's mother-in-law. But she had known Janie Gould's father when he lived in Stuart, but he became a lawyer and he went to Vero Beach. But Janie Gould has been a fixture at WQCS. She's retired from that now. But she got into this program of recording everybody's life stories and turning them over to the Library of Congress. But she did these Florida Frontiers pieces for the Florida Historical Society that took her things from her local store program was Florida Days. But so I'm listening to these recordings, and I hear her interviewing someone who said that they were the grandchild of a House of Refuge keeper. And here I have been doing it for 20 years at least, maybe 25. And I thought, I'd never heard of this person, how can this be? And so I called Janie, and she said, oh yes, she lived alone, and I think she was 87, and I have her phone number, and this had been 3 years previous. So I call her, and this cute little voice answers, and she was just a perky, wonderful person, and Tom and I visited her, and she had additional photographs of the Cotant family when Captain Samuel Cotant was at the House of Refuge at Mosquito Lagoon. And when I just said Captain, like my co-author, Tim Green, is a retired Navy man, Commander Reserve Navy man. And one of his main features in doing the book, I mean, he gave so much photographs and advice, but he would shake me up in misusing titles. And he told me I could not call them captain because they were keepers, and I should just say keeper, Samuel. And for all the different Coast Guard ranks and all, thank goodness he was my co-author because he knew all that stuff and I didn't. So Janie Gould happened to listen to it, and this is little Sarah Prado. And here are some pictures. This guy knows he gets the book, the Lighthouse Society book. What's its full name? The book, the magazine. Lighthouse
Digest or?
The Lighthouse Digest, and someone had found this picture on a postcard, and they said, does anybody know what's going on? And so between Alice and Josh, it got answered because it was one of the photographs in this book and one that the Cotants had given. But we had never had a picture of our keeper in a full uniform. That just shows you how precious they are. Here we had 10 houses of refuge and did not have a good picture of a keeper in uniform. So this is Tim Dream, and it was also serendipitous that we made a connection because the U.S. Life Saving Historical Association met here. Why? Because it's warm, and one of the people on their board has a mother that lives in the area. And so they were down here having their annual meeting at our Gilbert House of Refuge. They were really in at the Best Western, I guess, the old Holiday Inn is where they stay. But they asked me to give 2 talks because, I just made myself the authority. And so I gave the talks, but Tom and I also joined in all their field trips, and I saw a lot of things I'd never seen before. So it was really nice. But during this time, Tim Green said, oh, I have additional photographs, and I thought, no, couldn't possibly. And National Archives, and I think, we've been to the National Archives, my friends have been to National Archives, we have looked and looked for photographs. How can this be? But he did. He had additional photographs, and that made this book possible, along with Sarah Prado. This is one of my favorites. So, it was 1935, and in our book, you use your different reference material to make these conclusions about dates. And in our Gilbert Home of History book, I did have 1935 that they built this boathouse and did these cisterns. But here we have a photograph of the actual construction. The cisterns aren't even there yet. And look at this road. We complain about it being narrow now. And we just got the parking lot improved with big pieces of lumber or like telephone poles holding back the dune. But this obviously is trucked in. And so it's narrow, but it used to be even narrower. And you do know that this is when they moved the house about 30 feet toward the river from the ocean. And if you go to the House of Refuge, you can see that they've done that in the bricks. They made the outline of the house. So you can see exactly where it stood before it was moved to the west. This is the way those pictures, some of them from the National Archives, look. And you just don't realize how exciting to someone like me and Josh and Alice, when you, excuse me, I meant to point. When you have something like this written on the picture, exactly the date, and they came in little threes, triplicates, quite a few of them, but they had information right on them, and that was so helpful because you can trust it. And I'm going back to the picture we used on the cover. That was such a process. I submitted several photographs, but they're just so precious that and rare that we didn't have one that had a picture of the House of Refuge and something going on in it other than this. And this was tiny, tiny picture. And Tim Dring had a researcher, Candace Clifford, who was going to the National Archives, and she had been hired to scan these photographs that he was sharing with me. She didn't scan this one at a high enough resolution to be put on the cover. So I asked her, please, are you going back? And she said, oh, no, I'm miles away from the archives, and I don't think I'm going to go back. Then she did go back, and she couldn't find it. And then finally she found it. And finally she scanned it at a high enough resolution that we could use it. So it was really neat. And it, too, had the typing right on it. This is one from Susan Johnson, Susan Hall Johnson, and Jennifer. And Jennifer, her daughter, is here. Would you stand up, Jennifer? Please. This is Jennifer Strauss. Her mother originally shared photographs with me, but then that was in the days when you had a 35mm camera and made your copies that way. And then we thought, oh no, we want better copies. And so we said, Jennifer, can you find them? Can you go into storage? She has gone into storage a couple times for me. And I honestly think they might have even been misplaced because of our persistence, but then will be found again. But she went back, and this is an example of Fred Hall's pictures taken when he was in World War I out at the House of Refuge. And they're doing a practice session with the bridges buoy. And this is something that you did not do at a House of Refuge, but at a Coast Guard station. So this little talk is more about doing the book. It may be a little bit confusing about the different services and all. I'll try to clear up a few things. Okay, so when he was at the House of Refuge, it was a Coast Guard station. In 1950, when the Coast Guard was formed from the Revenue Cutter Service and the Life Saving Service, there was a new service, and it was the Coast Guard, and that was 1950. But there was some years of transformation, and for instance, the keeper of the House of Refuge just stayed there with his wife, and they just got in a crew for the first time. And he went from being the keeper to surgeon number one. So the Arcadia book covers houses of refuge and Coast Guard stations. And that's the way we ended up having enough photographs to tell, to produce an Arcadia book. So on the top, that's an example of a house of refuge, but on the bottom we included, let's see if I can. Okay, this is the first life-saving station that was built in Charleston. And you say, why in the world are you up in Charleston? The reason I'm up in Charleston is that we were in the district the life-saving service was very bureaucratic and very leveled. It had, it had different levels and districts. And we were first in District 7. And we had district superintendent. And in district superintendent was, in District 7 was Charleston. And at first they had, and it's a little confusing, they had their life-saving station on Morris Island, which is one side of the channel. And then when the shipping channel changed, they put it on Sullivan's Island. So it gets a little confusing, but both of those, this is the original one. And this is the original one at Santa Rosa, and that's up in the Florida Panhandle. And that was not in our district, so we didn't have the same people involved. But how could I leave it out when there was only one other life-saving facility in Florida? So, and this is Josh's area. This is the Jupiter life-saving station. Okay, Tim Dream, as I said, he just knows, he knew everything about boats. If you showed him, like this picture of the boat, this is Florida Archives. And he knew exactly what boat that was because it's in the New River and it was the Fort Lauderdale House of Refuge. And this boat, he knew exactly, he has done a great big academic book on boats, and it's done through the Florida presses, and every one of them is listed with a number. So it's really, he was an interesting person to have to work with a housewife, it was. So I'm saying, just remember that you can't know what to expect next. And so this is something that's been bugging me for years because we had this beautiful marker and we restored it after Francis and Jean. But on it, and you cannot even necessarily leave these great big metal historic markers. So I've been talking about tin, and look what it says. So that bothered me, but I wanted to find a lot of information on this left out House of Refuge, which was Cape Malabar House of Refuge. I wasn't really successful. And when you're in this hobby of ours, like Alice and Josh and me, you make all these connections and you have these history buddies. And I had a history buddy, Fred Hopwood, who lived near Melbourne. And I never met him face to face, but we had a very heavy correspondence for many years. And he told me that he had 100 pages on the Malabar House of Refuge. And so when he died, I just don't know what happened to it. So I was, so this is what I'm saying. It lasted only 5 years. And so here you can see it right on this map. There it is. House of Refuge. Okay. But I wanted photographs. I wanted portraits of the keeper. It was named Hopkins, and his wife had a number of children and actually died after childbirth while he was a keeper at the House of Refuge. So I didn't want it just to be forgotten. So there is this doctoral dissertation done by this Jennifer, do I have her name here, McKinnon, and it's not available in anything but online, but she had a footnote that said that Fred Hopwood's papers were at the New Smyrna Historical Society. So I called them. So I call and I say, well, I've seen this reference that you have the information from Fred Hopwood, and she said, oh, we only have a volunteer archivist and he only comes on Wednesday. And I said, well, I'll just tell you why I'm calling. And I told her, and she said, well, I have a connection with Houses of Refuge. So she tells me that this is her grandfather, this is her grandfather, and I'm very familiar with him because he was from Charleston, he was from Sullivan's Island, and he had been a keeper at Knuckle Creek, which is Vero Beach. And this is a letter that, oh, here, I'm jumping around. But this is her brother, the lady that answered the phone. This is her brother. Tom and I visited them when we went to see the life-saving station in Sullivan's Island. We sat on his porch and we got this photograph of her grandfather when we visited. So I already had that photograph. I didn't have the one of the man in his uniform, or that picture of Vincent. But it was such a coincidence. I mean, just a call out of the blue and this connection. So she was able to furnish a couple more pictures for the book. But such a coincidence. And this is a letter that we got from the National Archives that I had shared with their family. And this is what her grandfather said. He said, in 1905, he said, "The mosquitoes here are simply unbearable. I cannot bring my wife and baby to such a place, nor can I stay alone." So that's the way life was at these houses of refuge. And he just didn't want to be down here. He'd go back to Sullivan's Island. Many of the people who were on the crew at Sullivan's Island were our keepers in our District 7 and our 10 houses of refuge. So this is another serendipity story. I don't think Martin came, did he? Our neighbor Bill Robson's brother had been up to Charleston with his wife, and Bill said, "You know, Marty saw something that said Gilbert's Bar House of Refuge when he looked in a showcase in the Customs House in Charleston." I thought, that's really strange. So when we went to Charleston, we started to look for this. And they have a couple of custom houses, but here's Tom looking in the showcase at that oak. There were so many papers for the House of Refuge people and the life-saving service. So many papers, but not many photographs, because everyone that served had to take an oath practically every year, so you have a lot of those oaths floating around. And who was Dr. Axel Johansson? So here this roams around. This is a picture, another serendipity story, of Josephine and John Taylor. Now, John Taylor was our first representative in Martin County, and Josephine was, the daughter of Walter Kitchen, our merchant grocery man and pillar of the community. That's home is still standing over on Atlanta Avenue. But when she got married, they had their honeymoon out at the House of Refuge, the Trinket friends. And this is, they already got these fancy clothes at the House of Refuge. I mean, they look like they were going to, on a safari or something. But, so this is the picture taken at that time. And our Historical Society borrowed the wedding dress of Josephine, and that her granddaughters and daughters also had worn, but it was on display out at the Elliott's. And they had this little album that Josephine had made when she was there. And so when they decided to take the wedding dress down, it was getting too stressed, my friend Joe Marie Paradise said, "Please give me the album back." So gave the album back, and so Joe Marie called up. She said, "Sandra, weren't you wanting a picture of the Johansons?" And all along there had been one in that book that she had. So this is Captain Axel Johansson, whose oath was in Charleston, and it was really his wife that was so intriguing to me, because they were married. She grew up at a House of Refuge, and he was a shipwreck survivor who came to their House of Refuge at Chester Shoal, and then they were married, and so her whole life was in houses of refuge. And I never had a picture of her until Joe Marie finally gave this to me. So back to Sarah Prado. So here her picture of her family, and who are the Coutants. So this is Elwin Cotant, who lived here. And he had already given me some photographs of the Cotants because he lived in this house on California Street. It's now owned by Michael and Marie Bray. It was pink for a while, now it's lovely turquoise, matches my PowerPoint color. But when Elwin lived in it, had a screen porch, and he was a bachelor, and he had all these albums and things out on the porch, and I was a nuisance, and I said, Elwin, could I take these albums and could I make copies of your photographs? And I did. I used my 35mm camera on a stand and made copies of the pictures that are, we'll show them later. But this is his family home. And this is his father, who grew up at a house of refuge, the one on the front of the book. And actually, Harold, the photographer, the dad, kind of ran away. He was so afraid that he was going to be trapped as a house of refuge member. And his dad had been off sick sometime, and he had to take over. So he kind of stealed away, and he went to Fort Pierce first, and then he came to Stuart, and then his parents ended up retiring and following him. But that's the Harold and his son, Elwin. And these are two of the pictures. They're quite faint, but to have these pictures of everyday life in a house of refuge, they're the only ones I think that exist. And so between Sarah's and between the ones Elwin had given me, there's quite a few showing everyday life. So we have a chapter on the Cotants and a chapter on the hall pictures from the Coast Guard days. So here, Elwin comes. I'm just telling you a little about these families. And it's too bad that Joe left, and he's the one that skinned all these people that he had to go. And so, Joe Walton. So Harold had the first machine shop, kind of garage for automobiles, because automobiles were just getting in use locally. And he bought a car that had such wide wheels, like a wagon, that he could navigate the roads. And what this picture is, I think, is the Stuart Indian Road, the Indiantown Road, now Canner Highway, and he was taking Mr. Bentel on a trip to Indiantown politicking. But I just thought it was so priceless. I wanted to share it with you.
It says that he tried some hacking.
Hacking. That's what my husband proofread this for me. He said, "What do you mean?" It's an old term for being like a taxi driver.
Okay.
It's, what is it? Uber. He said Uber.
That's what it goes back to.
And that's, I put it parentheses, that's what he said. We had a tape recording of him, and that's where he said that.
Okay.
It's wonderful, these tape recordings that were made in 1960. So that's a direct quote. And here, I don't think I was hoping that Doug Whittle would be able to come tonight, but this is a picture from him. He's the Pioneer family, and so this little girl ended up marrying Harold Cotant, the one that ran away from the House of Refuge. And she's the daughter of McPherson's whole family. Homestead's where our hospital is. And this is what, I just took these the other day, like a week ago, but this is where Harold, their first home, and this is where the oldest child, Elwin, was born, and it's still there. It looks pretty cute, doesn't it? And this is, we use this picture, the woman he married, Edna Witham, became so much a fixture of the community, and her picture is, if you go to Blake Library, this very same picture is on the wall, because she was an early person to run the library when it was in the woman's club. Okay, so this is Sarah, the woman who's now 93, when she's visiting here. And this is Samuel's house. This is what we call a sandboard mat. And on it here, this is Woodman of the World. So this is Woodman Hall that we're all familiar with. You see that big white boxy building that's by the Selfish Circle. So that was Woodman Hall. So you know, get your orientation there. And then right catty corner is where they bought, and he had the first printing press that we had in town. It's called the Craft Printing Company. And this, I took this just the other day. This is the location. It's now a parking lot for AT&T, but that was where, and it's the Baptist church across the way. Okay, and many people in this room who are old-timers would know Clyde. He was more well-known in the community, Stuart plumbing, and was a wonderful sailor. And they had a beautiful home on Indian Street, Old Acres Boulevard, that went to both of them. And his daughter has just sold it and left town. Otherwise, we would have some croutons here. Okay, here's a picture of Fred Hall. And he's probably at home in this picture with a picket fence. And these are samples of the pictures that Susan shared, the one I already showed. And this one is in my book, Stuart on the St. Lucie. And this is, and here Joe just left, but this is his relative, Susan's grandmother. When my children were young, not Susan's grandmother, Jennifer's grandmother, when my children were young, she was very much a part of Jennifer's life, Ruth Hall. And this, I just thought was the perfect picture for my book because its name is Stuart on the St. Lucie. And this picture in here, I was hoping Joe would be here, who's a relative, if I got this wrong, but maybe Jennifer, if I got this wrong. But it was identified as Lily Wiley, who would have been Ruth Hall's mother. And this is the house where Jennifer lived as a little girl. And there were many Christmas parties in that house. And these were supplied by the Boutons, who scan everything. The Lockharts, who scan everything, and they illustrate some of Fred Hall's businesses. And so every time we go into one of those restaurants across from Memorial Park, and that plaza was built by him, and he also was one of the founders of the modern Martin County Dock Club when they brought it. You'll be able to read about these in the newsletter when it comes to you. So, and here's Jennifer's mother, Susan, and she has an auditorium named for her at the college. And wonderful lady, died much, I just couldn't believe it was that long ago when I wrote this in the caption. And so this is Jennifer's daughter, and she didn't get to come tonight, but they have been helping 3 generations of these women have been helping me with my House of Refuge pictures through the years. So back to the and I think I kind of wore you out. It's not too bad. But here you see, this is to show you that up on Sullivan's Island, that is now a Coast Guard station, and that then these are the 10 that go down the coast. And this one is just stuck on here for extra. And now I have to have a little bit about the life-saving service. It was really envisioned by Sumner Kimball. He was at the head of it the whole time. He retired from it when the Coast Guard was started in 1950, and he was, elderly then, but he lived to about 1923. And this is why we had houses of refuge. And this was a speech before Congress. On the coast of Florida, when vessels strand, they usually come well up to shore, so that sailors find little difficulty in reaching land Until of late, however, these shores are almost uninhabited, and mariners cast upon them were exposed to the terrors of starvation and thirst. So houses of refuge were not life-saving stations. There weren't enough people here to man a crew, and luckily we didn't really have to have a crew because people usually could get to shore, but it was such a wilderness that you needed somebody here to give them supper and put them up and get them back to civilization. Here are our first 5 houses of refuge, and they were numbered from 1 to 5, starting in Vero Beach, and of course it wasn't Vero Beach then, until down on Biscayne Bay. And then we had the 5 more plus the life-saving station at Jupiter, Josh's area. But we don't even have pictures of these during their house of refuge era. But here, this one was right at the Port Pierce Inlet, and it was in the 2nd series. And the one on the front that we're talking so much, that was in the 2nd series. And this was the original Morris Island one. So then this is, I had to pay $70 for these images, so I'm going to share them with postcards. But these are, so I could get high enough resolution for the one in Santa Rosa, the life-saving. It had to be replaced because it was damaged in a hurricane. Oops, how did I do that? Okay, this is the one on Sullivan's Island, and we took that picture when we visited it. Now it's part of, it's been restored and is something from history, it's not active. And this one is a ranger station now, the one up in Santa Rosa. All of the houses of refuge and the life-saving stations are public land now, and parks and such. Okay, I think I've already said that. Okay, this is to let you know these are, there were 8 still standing, and they became Coast Guard stations. So that's the connection, why we have both the Coast Guard and the life-saving in this book. And it tells about that era. And of course, during the wars, World War I and World War II, there was beach patrol and security, and also boat rescue. This one did not pass the grade of being a good enough resolution. It was one of my favorites. But because this is staying at Fort Pierce, and this is the replacement Coast Guard station. They used the old House of Refuge for a while, but then they built this in 1937, I believe. And this guy in the middle, guy in the middle, this one is Culpepper, chief. And he already had all of his crew during World War II. And the Coast Guardmen had really kind of palatial situation. You know, they had a building and real rooms, and all the other people in Fort Pierce were in tents. It was like a huge, huge city because that's the birthplace of the underwater demolition and frogmen. So just put this in that like Tim Dream knew exactly this boat, and this is Culpepper that was in the center. And he was at our House of Refuge, and he was the one that was there in 1935 when they had the preacher there, and the bottom floor fell through. And they decided they needed to restore the house and move it away from the ocean. So that was that era. And then, I don't know, some of you may know who Anita Tilton Walker was. But Shirley Culpepper, their daughter, was her good friend, and she told me a lot about spending the night at the House of Refuge and how Shirley came to school, sometimes in the Coast Guard boat. And this picture, you can tell, was taken right in front of the Gricko House in Jensen. And so there are other things that would interest people that just generally, this is a keeper that died in service. His son's arm was bitten off by a shark, and there were no doctors. So this one, like Tim said, oh, we've got to tell about the motorcycle patrol. And I thought, oh gosh, there was no motorcycle patrol. That wouldn't work, and it didn't work, but they did try it. And this is a wonderful photograph of a Coast Guardman, and he happens to be from a pioneer family in Fort Lauderdale. So the caption will explain that. And then the hanging, death by hanging, the only one that we've had anything like that. This guy was running. He killed 3 of the men when they boarded his boat. He had a gun. It's just like today. You have a gun, you're in trouble, you're deranged, you shoot people. So he ended up being hung. And this is his warrant, his death warrant. I put it in the book. And he was he committed the murders in 27, but was hung in 29. The courthouse the county government didn't want anything to do with this. This was just going to ruin tourism. And they did not want to be the one to execute this man, so they said he was a pirate. And he needed to be hung where he was arrested and came ashore, so that's what we did. And this is where that is now. My kids just went to a rock concert. And this is where the House of Refuge once stood, right across from the Hamar, to that concert, and that was taken by my son-in-law's cell phone before Christmas. And I thought, that really tells you how things have changed. And most of the locations, thank goodness, Gilbert haven't changed quite that much. But thank you for your attention. I think that's it. Okay. It was longer than I should have done. Forgive me. Thank you. Does anybody have a question?
I have a question about where is Mosquito Lagoon at?
Oak Hill is the little town that's across from it, but it's now in Canaveral National Seashore.
Oh, it is?
You go past, it's near Daytona, but then you
Yeah,
go toward the seas and go through and you pass Turtle Mound, and they took over all these little towns like Eldora and Shiloh, and they're inside the National Seashore. And then they just have the site of the Mosquito Lagoon House of Refuge. There's nothing there. But one thing that is so funny, most of these houses of refuge had century plants planted there. And they often took pictures in front of the century plants. They are now an invasive species in the National Seashore. And even in Fort Pierce, you can see them there, and you say, that's where the House of Refuge was. It's right behind the Seal Museum in that area, that parking lot. So, thank you. Shannon mentioned that here.
I know your book is about Florida, but did they go any further north?
So we have life-saving stations all over the country, hundreds of them, and many of them are preserved, and it's a very wonderful history and much more easy to gather. They're all around the Great Lakes, they're on both coasts, and that was a very important.
And they're all separate from the lighthouses, though.
Yes, and Josh would probably be, we have the lighthouse service, and then the life-saving service. It's very confusing. And then you probably could help me. Then the Coast Guard took over the lighthouse service at Josh.
So the Coast Guard was formed in 1915 with the Revenue Service and the Life Saving Service. The Lighthouse Service stayed separate at that time, and then in 1939, it merged with the Coast Guard. So a lot of times the Life Saving Service is considered the sister service to the Lighthouse Service, because both started as a civilian agency and are both now part of the Coast Guard.
Thank you. Thank you. Visit the lighthouse and go buy a book on here's the.
Just one more question. Basically, I thought you said something, I just wanted to confirm. Are all the locations of the houses of refuge, did you say they're all public lands now? So there's no hotels or anything on any of the properties?
No, hotels, no. But they're, at least part of it. It's like in Miami Beach, there is a park, but I'm sure the land was larger than that park is today. But there is a park where the House of Refuge stood on Key Biscayne. And it is so funny, it's like Fort Lauderdale. I mean, you would never dream it. But it's fun to look at my book and see what it looked like, and then know what it's like when you go to Miami Beach now on Collins Avenue. And my son Todd, he has a wonderful, speak up Todd about how.
Where's the Chester Shoal House of Refuge?
Oh, see, this will be on another program. But Chester Shoal is very interesting because where the House of Refuge stood is where the space shuttle is shot off. Correct? Right, it's the pad, it's just, but then I call that public, it's government land. If we can't go, don't have access just readily to the Space Center, but it's public.
I know a lot of the original houses of refuge, some fell victim to hurricanes and fire and so forth. Was there effort to save any of the last surviving ones, like Indian River Inlet, which I know was there through World War II, or did we just got lucky here in Martin County?
See, there's just so much sitting, and in the book there was a picture of what they used the underwater demolition training. They had all these obstacle courses and everything, and there's a picture I put in the book. It was hard to get. Of the men all sitting, they did this big climbing device over the old House of Refuge. It was a part of their obstacle course, and then they took this picture of them all sitting on it, and I thought that just had to be in the book, and it is, but it was hard to get a copy that was good enough to put in it, but we do have that. But that's what happened to it, and then, they were always blowing up things during when they were practicing there, and it just got hung up to with, they demolished it at that time during wartime practice. Okay, thank you. Oh, books are for sale out there. You don't have to copy anything. That's all your excuse.